what does the restaurant, the servers, what are they gaining or what are they losing in this whole big scheme of things?
The taxes on tips is a little convoluted. The cash tips are going to make that as a deduction, and you don't have to pay taxes on your cash tips, which is great. So, especially for those in certain nightclub arenas or certain bars. However, there's still going to be taxes on your tips on credit card payments. So, oftentimes in today's society, I would say more than 85% is done on a debit or credit card, and you write the tip down. So, that part still will be tipped as of right now, but there's not going to be any taxes on cash. So in essence, those employers are normally tipped normally are make less than a certain amount of wages. It might be $4 their minimum wages. They live off of tips. So again, a portion of their tips will not be taxed. The cash portion won't be taxed. The credit card portion still will be taxed unless they make changes before this is fully passed.
When it comes to like waiters and waitress, I saw a lot of things online where people were like, well, that's my last time with tipping folks. Like, should people take, taxing?
Well, let me play devil's advocate. Growing up, I've had numerous jobs from, cutting grass as a kid to being a bartender. And I will tell you, those tips don't really make up oftentimes based on what's going on, the situation. I've never heard anybody say, well, it's slow tonight. Let me tip them a little bit more. Right? That's never happened. So why should the effect of how their money is taxed based on how you tip? You're tipping for service in essence. So if the service is better or worse, I don't believe the tips should change. But I mean, everybody's entitled to their own practice. It sounds like somebody just doesn't want to tip, right?
The problem is, I feel like some restaurant owners are going to take advantage of this. They're going to do something where I'm thinking in my mind, like if I was a restaurant owner and I don't know, I would just do some sort of incentive or something where they would, get more cash and I could pay them less because the whole restaurant industry and the way that it moves anyway, they should be being paid exactly what they're supposed to be paid. They shouldn't be working off of tips anyway. Tips are something that forces us. We're buying the food from you. You're supposed to be paying for service anyway. And the tips is like an afterthought. You know what I'm saying?
It is, but I will tell you, so everything has a net effect, right? And you bring up a great point. Why am I supplementing your salary? Is basically what you're asking, right? So realistically, the largest expense for any business is employees. The restaurant industry has a very large expense in cost of goods sold buying food. Think about this. When you walk into your restaurant, they have to be able to prepare whatever you order, right? So in order for that, they have to buy a lot of food and therefore throw out a lot of food. So how does that supplement? They pay less in employee pay, and they're supplemented by the tips that they get. So in essence, if you did what you're supposing to do, there'd be more restaurants go out of business. Banks don't lend money to new restaurants unless you have a huge proven track record because it's a very volatile business. A lot of those businesses go out quickly. They go out of business pretty fast. So unless you have a track record or a history or proof that you can maintain a restaurant, those are very tricky businesses.
But on the other side, right? After the Civil War, if you want to go back to the tipping system in the first place in America, this came particularly for restaurants and railroad workers that were basically not being paid fair wages, and then they would have to rely on tips. So that's how it came. But then somehow, some way, they started to become taxed specifically on those tips. So it shouldn't matter if it is a credit card or cash.
So the reason being they changed the rules. So when you take a tip on a credit card, there's also a tip portion that gets taxed. That gets taxed towards Social Security, right? Whereas cash does not get taxed most of the time. They don't even report most of the cash tips they receive.
Right.
So when those tips go through a credit card, they have to report that because now we have a proof that someone received extra funds.
Yeah.
Those tips are then put down on their payroll, and then those tips are taxed Social Security and wages. So on a $200 meal, if you paid $40, they're gonna net walk away with $32. Right? Because there's additional taxes paid on those tips. That's why a lot of cash tips do not get reported or get reported in a lesser amount than they actually are.